Once you do and you let go of those heavier energies that you used to sit with, that frozen energy, your frequency raises. You vibrate higher. You're in more joy. You're in more calm or peace. And when you are, literally float above the problem. And now you're able to see the solution so easily that it's like, why didn't I ever see it before? Well, that's exactly why, because now you're above that problem.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. I am your host, Vanessa Soul. Thank you so much for tuning in today and investing your time and your energy into listening to today's episode. I'm super excited for today's guest. We have Tasleem Jessani, and I think that is such a beautiful, bright name. And she is a hypnotherapist, intuitive coach who helps people release self sabotaging patterns rooted in childhood and generational and past life trauma. Tasleem, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I have a signature question that I love to ask everyone. Who are you and who are you not?
You talked about how I'm a hypnotherapist and an intuitive leadership coach, but I'm also a mom of two children. My beautiful daughter's 13, my son is almost 9. So I'm a busy mom and I love to cook, I love to dance, I love to have fun. I do a lot of fun things with my kids. So yeah, I am a sort of a fun-loving person. Um, yeah, who am I not? I can honestly say I'm not fake. However, I grew up as a people pleaser, and so it's a pattern I'm actually learning to shift and change. So sometimes I feel like I'm being a little fake because I'm still learning to deconstruct that pattern, but I definitely from the bottom of my heart feel like I'm an authentic person, so I don't want to be fake when I'm working with people or talking to others.
Powerful answer. I love the who are we not part because we actually get to define our boundaries. Like you just said, I'm not going to be a people pleaser anymore. or I'm unraveling that pattern. By the way, I'm raising my hand. I didn't even figure out what people pleasing was until I was like 32. Right. So it's 32 years of unconsciously people pleasing. And that was my survival strategy. That's how I survived relationships and life and like all types of things. So thank you for sharing that. I know a lot of people can relate to that people pleasing archetype. And if we have time to fit it into hypnotherapy, we'll see how that fits in if you want to share more about that later. But first, I want to just understand a little bit more of how did your journey start? Were you always a sensitive person to energy, to intuition as an intuitive coach now? But how did you discover your own interest in this type of work and your sensitivities to it?
So I have always been a very sensitive child. And I remember even growing up, my parents would say that, I'm just so sensitive to everything, certain smells, certain tastes, certain people. And I was the type of child that would run away a lot. And the energies, when they got too big, I would run away and I would hide a lot. And I always thought that was something wrong with me. And, you know, the dark scared me, like all sorts of things, even watching certain movies with like it's a little bit scary. Even as I got older, I just couldn't handle it. It was too much for my system, but I just thought that was me. And I thought there was something wrong with me, right? I'm just more sensitive than others. But as I started doing my work in corporate HR, actually, and then I just went through my own healing journey, I met a coach who talked about intuition. And I've always been very interested in things like past lives or understanding, like, where do we come from and those big questions. And I realized that's because I am naturally very open. We are all, as human beings, very open, very intuitive, but some are naturally more open than others to receive. And so I did realize I have a very big gift, and it came fast as soon as I realized it and understood how I could develop it. It came really quickly. So yeah, that in a nutshell has been me.
Yeah, and I'm curious, did you also suppress it before you embraced it? Because for me, I was a very sensitive child, clairvoyant at the age of 4 and 5, like all the clairs, and I suppressed it. I spent like my first 30 years trying to resist it. I know that's not the path for everyone, but I'm curious, did you dabble in that for a period of time at all?
It would actually make me very nervous to dabble into it. So in my own way, I too suppressed it. And the way I suppressed it was very much, I just was very logical. I was like really focused in school and outcomes. And um, because of that, I didn't actually trust my intuition a lot or my body's instincts. So even like not eating certain times so that I could numb out certain feelings and like sensations. I never realized it. It's just everything was too uncomfortable all the time, and nobody around me knew how to support it either. So dabbling in it for me felt scary, and so I was like, no, no, I'm gonna just run from it. But you can only run so far. I hit that wall at some point where I was like, I have to face this because it's a part of me, but I would have never known it before, for sure.
That's so interesting. It's such a common pattern for us intuitives where we go through this phase of long suppressions until we can't anymore, until it just, we just answer the call one way or another. I'm interested, now that you're a mother, um, y- how does this impact your relationship with your kids or how you raise them? Do you encourage any of the intuitive abilities if they're interested in it? Like, how does this shape their lives?
I love this question because with my kids, both of them are very intuitive in very different ways. And at first, I had to work through a lot of, oh no, they're going to feel how I've felt in the world. And I did have a lot of fear coming into motherhood. I felt like in raising them, they've encouraged me to also face my fears and to sit with the parts of me that I decided I don't want to acknowledge or take in or embrace. And as I've worked with them, it's been hard because sometimes they don't want to sort of integrate with how everybody else is. But then as I noticed the intuition and where they're coming from, the more I supported it, the more they would just come out of their shells. So it's been a journey and it's been hard. And most of it has been me just releasing what's going on with me so I can just let them be them. I don't have to force them or change them or do anything, but that's hard. That's a hard thing when they're turning the mirror on you, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is more my stuff than anything else. So, yeah, at this point, I embrace it a lot with them and I work with them on what works for them. And I notice their nervous systems. And the more we do that, the more they come out in their like authentic selves. It's really awesome to see.
I love that. And what are some quick tips before we move on to so many good things? What are some quick tips for parents who have intuitive kids and they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I want to honor it. I want to support it. Like, where do I start?
I mean, it depends on where that person is, but I have definitely a lot of clients who come to me who are stepping into motherhood. And the first thing I tell them is, look, your children are going to come in with their own journey as well as to reflect to you everything you haven't healed. So they're going to trigger you so much. If parents can get behind a healing journey and really learn to sit with what's coming up for them, that's the biggest thing I can tell them. So quick tricks would be learning how to regulate your nervous system so that when you're sitting with your child and they're having big emotions, you can regulate yourself and then help regulate them. So if you're a parent who tends to explode, get angry quickly, react quickly, learn to regulate your nervous system, do some things, learn breathing, learn like basic, very basic things, just learn to breathe, or learn to just sit with the trigger without going and reacting. Those would be some of the simple things I would say to start with. Um, because again, depends on where that person is in their healing journey or their awareness of what's going on with them.
I love it. Those are great suggestions. Thank you for that. They sound basic, but I think they go a long way.
Yeah.
Anything with the nervous system. And I'm glad you mentioned the nervous system a couple times already. How do patterns like people pleasing, addiction, and chronic burnout connect back to the nervous system?
Yes, I love this. When I work with clients who are coming in saying, I can't say no, I can't set boundaries, all these things that they're carrying with them, or they're, the patterns of overworking or overachieving, things like that. Every single time when I've worked with them, I've traced it back to a time in their life when they were so frozen or they were so disconnected from their body that they couldn't actually regulate themselves. So at the end of the day, the nervous system is about telling us we're in danger. So if there was a time in your childhood and your dad yelled at you and your instincts are to fight, run away, freeze up, or fawn and just people please out of it, that energy that is supposed to come out of you gets stuck in you. And it's almost like that piece of you gets stuck in that moment in time without having regulation. So I love how we just talked about, as a parent, the best thing you could do is learn to regulate yourself. Well, that's exactly as a child. Imagine your parent doesn't know how to regulate and they just explode on you and you're sitting there frozen. They could be the most loving parent in the world. But if that parent or caretaker, whoever is there, even if it's someone who's bullied you or anything, if nobody knows how to come and help you regulate and process your emotion, you literally can't digest it. So then your nervous system, each time something familiar happens, that feels the same, it just gets activated again into the same responses. So really, when we look at people pleasing, even it's just a reaction, and you are basically trying to protect yourself in those moments the same way you did in that time when you got stuck in that moment in time. So the best way to help that nervous system is to go back in hypnotherapy to those moments and you become that adult self to help regulate your younger self and help them release that emotion that got stuck there.
Oh my gosh, that is so informative. And
Yeah.
then what about addiction? Because I feel like people don't know that addiction is also a nervous system dysregulation challenge.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about, like, for example, if someone's smoking or using alcohol or even eating. Emotional eating is a huge one. All these things are to help bring comfort. So, what the person is doing is they're reaching out for comfort. And so, when we try to remove that addiction from that person's life, they then are dysregulated. And again, they're back into this nervous system state that is so uncomfortable. So, a lot of these things, if they're soothing, for example, and even overeating can have a very soothing impact. It can also be very numbing, which can be very helpful for a hyperactive nervous system. So I've worked with people who have grown up, for example, taking care of their younger siblings or staying at home by themselves when their parents are working. Their nervous systems were so hyperactive all the time that they learned to find things to help them cope, which actually also help them sort of get a little sleepy, get a little numb, which brings that extreme nervous system down to what feels calming. Unfortunately, they all too often go into hypoarousal, which then comes more into depressive states. So then we want to push our nervous system back up, right? We're like, I feel sleepy, I'm in hypoarousal. So then we find addictive behaviors to get us kind of back up again. And so that up and down cycle is how addictions are created because we look for those hormonal impacts from it, that spike in dopamine, that increase in oxytocin, up and down, up and down. And that's essentially the addiction cycle. And it's really not the person's fault at all. If they can see that cycle, they can actually start to break it.
So powerful. And understanding the root, like a nervous system dysregulation as the root cause, uh, how does that change how we address it? And also, does hypnotherapy address it, or how? I guess I'm sure it does, but how can it address some of these things?
I see lots of different healing modalities and tools out there. And the most common thing is people say, I've tried all the mindset tools, I've tried the affirmations, I've tried, nothing works, right? And that's because with the nervous system, if this is going on underneath the surface, underneath the root, if this younger part of you feels so unsafe, you can't logic your way out of it. It's impossible. So, it's as an example in hypnotherapy, it allows you to come to that deeper root, that energetic root of the issue, so that once we can create safety for that little person that was so scared, then we actually, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because we can see that version of us and hold compassion for her or him. And the thing is, as we're growing up, we can't hold that compassion because we're told all the time from people, just toughen up, you know, toughen up. Like, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. So the story gets wrapped in our head. We become creatures of our own story, but the story is created by everybody else, right? So then it's really hard to identify. So then most people will go and do all these programs and then they'll tell themselves, man, I'm just such a failure and I'm such a this and that. But what we need to do is get to that root. And that's with the hypnotherapy, people can do that because it's that state of consciousness you go into where you can let go of the logic and just come to your body and see what's going on in there.
Is it
Um,
the theta state? I have to ask.
Yeah, it's like a delta state. There's a theta state you can go into, and it really, yeah, it really depends on that person's level of consciousness, because some people can go into that theta state really fast. But yes, the theta state is one, but first we start by going into a delta state, which is that state of when we're about to go to sleep. And that's when all our defenses start to relax.
We could rewire our brain there. That's essentially what you're saying, right? We can rewire
Yes.
our brain in those states.
Yes, exactly. And that too, I think a lot of people talk about rewiring the brain, and maybe there's not enough understanding of what that means. But even if I take that example of, if your entire life you saw yourself as that scared little girl who could not stand up for herself, and you have no empathy for her because she's the reason that you're scared now, for an example, the rewiring happens when we can go back to those places and see how scared she was, have the empathy, have the compassion, work with her to release the energy that was stuck in there. That allows the nervous system to relax and then the new brain waves to connect. Oh, this is safe. Oh, I can do this and nothing bad will happen. Oh, I see why I was reacting that way. So it's interesting with the rewiring of the brain because it's not so much you just repeat the same thing over and over and it'll change. I mean, for some people it will, but if you have a very, very active nervous system and a lot of that trauma that's really deep in there, it will be really hard for you to do that without actually going into those places to heal that part of you. So that's a part of the rewiring that's going on.
Yes. And it's because we have to unlock that frozen energy. And by the way, you're doing a great job of describing this. When I was doing more healing work for clients, I knew all of this like on a soul level. I knew it so well, but I couldn't articulate it as well as you are. But yeah, just for anyone who's wondering, like, why would that even work to go back in time when I was scared? Why does that work to have compassion for the little me? It's because it unlocks that frozen energy. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I love that. It unlocks the frozen energy. And just for people who are very practical about it, animals, when they play dead to avoid being attacked by that big animal, that frozen energy, animals, when they come out of it, they shake, they let it out of their system. So essentially, that's frozen energy. When you're saying releasing it, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get back so that version of you starts to cry or has someone to hug or has someone to co-regulate with so that it brings down them to like, oh, I can release this now. And that's why when people are often doing this work, we do a lot of you got to shake out the energy, you got to do the somatic exercises, and it's all part of that picture. But most people even can't even do somatic exercises or breath work when their nervous system is so hijacked. And so they'll come to me and they'll say, I have panic attacks just trying to do breath work. And I'm like, yes, that was me as well. And I couldn't understand why. I'd sit and try to meditate. I couldn't understand why I was panicking. And it's because my nervous system was so hijacked, I can't calm down without feeling like there's a bear chasing me. So that's why it's even more important to go to those places where it's trapped energy. And we can't always do that from up here.
I'm curious to know for you, and I know this is different for everyone. It was different for me too. Like sitting down for a 5 minute meditation was very stressful, but I'm curious to know what it was for you. What was the bridge, habit, exercise, tool, etc., that worked with where you were at in your current nervous system so that you could eventually do breath work or any of the other tools?
Yes. The reason I love this question is because, people who are healing really want the results to be so quick, and I was definitely one of them, very impatient. But what I had to do is I had to go with where my nervous system was, and I interestingly had to use my intuition a lot for it. But in the beginning, it was guided meditations that felt safe, just listening to them, trying to understand what it's like to connect to the earth and have a little bit of calm in my system. And over time, the more I stayed with those practices, because they would bring panic, and I learned that, okay, if I can stay with a panic attack, if I can stay with that and just breathe through it, it will go away. That was the first thing I learned that has taken me through this entire journey where layers, like I had to start with a smaller level of it, just sitting with a small panic attack to sitting through the biggest fears I've ever had in my entire life. It's just sitting with, it's a feeling. I'm not going to get in my head. What is it, the sensation in my body? And even also understanding you can hold negative emotions in the body and positive emotions at the same time. And actually, I created a guided hypnosis that I offer as a freebie for people to use because I created it based on that so that people who have a very hijacked nervous system can start to just sit with what am I feeling, but then also finding that tiny spot in the body that feels good and naming it and starting to learn to spread the positive feeling. That builds the safety in the body that I'm actually not completely consumed by the negative emotion because most people are afraid they're going to get stuck there. I have this negative emotion, I'm never coming out. It's like fear is the worst, right? But if you can learn that, oh, along with fear, I can also actually find a little bit of love somewhere, or a little bit of compassion, or a little bit of calm, then we can spread that. And then we just practice doing that each day. That's why I created that hypnosis because it helped me the most.
So powerful because it is a fear that keeps people from even starting their integration journey, or most people call it a healing journey. I call it integration journey, but it keeps people from even being feeling safe enough to do that because that fear could be so big. Like if I feel the anger or the sadness or the grief, I'm going to get stuck there for a month, for 3 months. But if we're able to meet our nervous system with a tool that you just mentioned that you have available, or anything else that's a smaller baby step that really allows us to have that bridge. So that is so powerful. Why does why is it that traditional mindset work doesn't work after a while? Sometimes talking about things, it's like step one because we have awareness and we get to talk to people. We kind of get to get our thoughts out. I think there's a limitation to that as well. And yeah, why is it that mindset work can't really offer the comprehensive healing that goes deep, into our subconscious?
There's a couple of reasons with mindset work because one is we actually can't get ourselves out of a problem from the same mindset that we got ourselves into it. So when we look at a problem or an issue that we're in, we were at a certain energetic level, frequency level to attract that problem to us. So that happens to us because we can only, for people who like don't fully understand the frequency work necessarily, when we see something, when it's in front of us, it's because we're an energetic match to it. We match it, we can see it. That's why sometimes something will be like right in front of you and you don't actually see it. It's because your energy is not matched up with it. So when we're doing mindset work, a lot of people want to solve the problem that they're in, but they're actually not at the frequency level to be able to solve the problem because if the problem is at the level of like, I mean, I don't know if someone's listening to a podcast, they can't see this, but like if I'm holding my hands up like, at my neck level and this is where the problem is, then you actually have to be above the problem to be able to solve it. Now, our energy is dictating where we're at all the time. We're energetic beings. So what people do, unfortunately, is they try to solve the problem with their head, but their energy is with the problem. So all they do is spin in circles and they end up in more than likely either self-blame cycles, pushing themselves too hard, or they say, "Oh, I'm lazy and I procrastinate and I can't solve this problem." But that's not what's actually happening. It's that you haven't done the healing work to sit with and understand what's going on. Once you do and you let go of those heavier energies that you used to sit with, that frozen energy, your frequency raises, you vibrate higher, you're in more joy, you're in more calm or peace. And when you are, literally float above the problem. And now you're able to see the solution so easily that it's like, why didn't I ever see it before? Well, that's exactly why, because now you're above that problem. It's honestly why in corporate world and stuff they say things like what got you here won't get you there, right? And the missing piece that usually is in between that is it's your energy you got to shift. And that's why people who go through the healing journey, that's where they see the biggest transformation because they're doing the things to release all those old patterns and old energy. And then they're rising above the issues and they're going to newer frequencies where that problem now doesn't exist anymore.
So powerful. Thank you for describing it so beautifully. The way you describe things, it's like, oh, so simple now. But yeah, thanks for describing it that way. And it made me think of like, this is why it's so important to have an intuitive coach or a hypnotherapist or whatever coach, guide, whoever is going to be assisting you, mentor, or someone, because it helps us typically if the person's in integrity with themselves and they're in a good vibration it can help us get to that. Again, some people aren't seeing our hands, but we have our hands like right at our chest and we're raising our hands above towards our head, like it helps us rise above that problem. Or sometimes a tool, right? Sometimes we're just doing a tool and that tool allows us to kind of get out of the frequency of where the problem is at the baseline, and that meditation brings us up just enough to see that bird's eye view or to get out of that stuck energy, right? So that we can rise above it to solve it. So I love that. This is making so much sense of like, how our self-sabotaging patterns, right? Like typically my interpretation, you can tell me what you think, they're probably protective. And I think you might have said that in so many words. Like they're protective patterns, but when we get to the root cause, when we regulate our nervous system, when we, do something to change our frequency, or when we have help from a coach or a guide, we can solve the problem differently. Um, anything else that you want to add, like how important this is, or how much it could really lead to like a longer transformation?
So when I see people, for example, because I came from corporate organization, I worked in human resources, and I could pinpoint how often people are just playing out their patterns. And what that ends up leading to is we attract the same thing all the time. So if we have, a core belief, for example, that I'm not enough, and if we've also lived in our childhood through patterns where people have gaslit us a lot, often we can't remember those things. They just happen, especially when we have loving people around us who, I don't know, we don't even necessarily would think that they do something like that. These patterns just get ingrained in us. So then we end up in that relationship that becomes toxic, or work environments like that happened to me a lot where I loved where I worked, but eventually turned toxic. How was this happening every time? And it's only from me understanding that these were recreating the same energies from my childhood. And if I don't release those things, if I don't work with them and work on them, I'm just going to attract more of the same. So self sabotage is not just necessarily, like doing destructive things, but it can also be ending up in the same situation over and over and being like, how am I ending up here? And so a lot of people, I'd see that in career, like people who are chronic overworkers go to a job that's supposed to be way more aligned with their family life and work-life balance, end up in the same cycle, working like 60 hours a week. How is that happening? And when I coach them, I'd say, you didn't want this, but they just created it because that's the energy. They're running away from something. They're doing, you know? So um, that's why I do stress the importance of it because what we actually really thrive on if we're in a toxic energetic pattern with anyone, we thrive on that energetic dance we do with people. Like if you're an empath, you will find someone who's got more of that narcissistic type trait. And any empath knows that's exhausting and we don't like it. but
No.
but it's a cycle that we do actually crave, and it's hard to admit that, but we
Mhm.
crave it because of old wounding. But then we can come out of those cycles, and how freeing that is, and how you can step into your magnetic self in a different way and call in love and support in a healthy way. I mean, that's like unmatchable, I guess. I think it's the best word, but like you can't match that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So true. And it's an important awareness to have, like if you're attracting something, it's like a repeat. So you got to like change your vibration, change where you're at, really, really start to shift those patterns in your mindset and your body, just releasing, like we were talking about like shaking it all out. There's processes for that, but so some people do just start shaking, right? Like randomly, but there's more strategic ways to really get that energy out, but so important. So now I want to, as we start to wrap up a little bit, I want to start talking about some practical tips. Um, Specifically for entrepreneurs, a lot of my listeners are conscious entrepreneurs. So like, what is something that they could do during their busy schedules, or like, they only have 15 minutes for a routine, for a morning routine. What are some ways that we could do some of those things to help regulate our nervous system?
Yeah, I definitely can resonate as an entrepreneur myself, and also because I have a lot of clients who are in that space too. And, some simple things. So I have for my clients, I offer a morning guided practice that I think is very valuable. And a person can do this on their own too, is as soon as you wake up, is just imagine yourself in a shield, a beautiful bubble, a beautiful shield that is arm's length around you, and practice saying, "This is my energy." And just allow that shield to consume you with golden light energy or whatever color resonates for you. That is such a beautiful practice. And if a person can't visualize it, they can just put their hands on their solar plexus, like right in the middle of their rib cage, and then just allow it with their breath to expand. Even just a couple minutes doing that and just saying, "This is my energy, my space," and visualizing any other toxic or any energy coming at it, bouncing off this shield can really help you contain your energy. I notice people doing this with my work, and I give them a guided practice for it. Within a day or two, they're noticing the difference between their own energy and other people's. Because most of the time, entrepreneurs, when they are struggling, are taking on too much of other people's energy. And if you're working with clients, you feel overly responsible for everything on the client's behalf too. And it's very challenging. So in the morning, that is, I suggest like do not go to your phone right away. I know we hear this repetitively. Don't go to your phone, but also like really avoid getting in your head and do a visualization practice that makes you feel expanded, makes you feel big, even if that's a couple of stretches. If this visualization doesn't work for you, doing something like that, or taking a walk outside for 10 minutes can really help. So anything that just gets you in your body first can really help. And then throughout the day, honestly, I just would recommend people just write down what triggers them. Just take a journal and notice every time you're triggered. And when I mean triggered, it's you something made you angry, something made you defensive, something made you sad, something made you freaked out. Write them down. Just start there. And then at the end of the day, just notice. Or at the end of the week, just notice. You'll find a trend of things that are triggering. Just observing that is already going to help you start releasing the energy behind it. And you'll start noticing a calmer nervous system just because you're capturing and noticing the triggers. So, because in entrepreneur world, I mean, the biggest triggers I see for women are like charging more money, like saying no to their clients, setting boundaries, right? Things like that. So you'll see the pattern. And then when you see the pattern, you'll be like, oh, wow. And then just
Yeah.
notice where it is in your body. That as soon as you're triggered, is my chest burning? Is my heart beating fast? And then just breathe through it for a few minutes. Give yourself 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes just to breathe through it. Not do anything. Don't react. I
Yeah,
guarantee you'll
absolutely.
feel it.
Yeah, I love that. And, it took me 4 years of entrepreneurship minimum, maybe more. But it took me that much time to figure out that I had a boundaries issue, right? And not setting boundaries, not keeping, or setting the boundary and not keeping it, or like
Yep.
or giving it away, feeling emotionally responsible for other people, clients, when someone wasn't happy or critical, just all of those things. So yeah, really important stuff. And I did start to keep a trigger journal 1 year, and I brought so much stuff out of my unconscious, right? Like just turning over that rock. Because like I think what keeps us in some of these energies that we were talking about earlier is just not being aware of it,
Exactly.
not being conscious of it. Awareness doesn't heal everything. It doesn't allow us to fully integrate. It doesn't get it out of the body, but it is step one. So thank you for sharing those practical tips as we're wrapping up. I really appreciate that. And I would love to hear about what offer you have, or like how people can work with you in just a moment. I'm going to give everyone her website, and the links are here in the description. So you could obviously just go down to the description. We have her Facebook link, her Instagram, and her LinkedIn. And then her website is her first and last name. So I'll just spell it out: TASLEEMJESSJESSANI.com. So make sure you connect with her, and we would love to hear about what you have to offer or how people can work with you.
Mention my website. I want to mention too, if you go to my website, there will be a pop-up that shows up where you can sign up and receive that meditation I was talking about earlier, finding safety in the body. So that's something I want to make sure that people know they can access easily. Yeah, and then in terms of the ways to work with me, I primarily do one-on-one work. I find at the end of the day, I got to work with the person where their nervous system's at. And so my transformational program called Rising Phoenix is a 4-month program where I do a combination of hypnotherapy and coaching. And the transformation is so intense and insane, but people transform completely under this program. So if you're interested, then definitely come to my website, send me a note and let me know, and we can chat a little bit about. I offer 30-minute free chats. We can talk about where your block is and see if it's a good fit for you.
Beautiful. Do you have any quotes or book recommendations that you quickly want to leave us with?
But recently I read Eat, Pray, Love. I know it's so lame because it's been so long after, but that author, Elizabeth Gilbert, is amazing. She also has a book called Big Magic. I feel like for people, if they are in this healing journey, will take a lot from some of her books. So as an author, I think she's incredible. I don't myself have a quote right now, but I do say if somebody wants to start to tap into some magic, read Big Magic. That's a great book.
That's a great recommendation, actually. Love it.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for being on this show. And thank you everyone for tuning in. My internet was like going in and out. So I wanted to end this on a strong note, but I think we got all of it in here, which is great. Namaste, everyone. Have a great day.